Hi, John. Thank you, everyone. Sorry for the delay. I'm going to put on my video quickly so that you can all see me. Can you guys see me?
No, not yet, ma'am.
Okay, just hold on. Some technical issue. Can you see me now? Hello?
Now we can see you, ma'am. Yeah, now we can see you.
All right. I had to change settings and locations for light so that you can clearly see me. So I'm sorry for the delay. I'm so excited to see all the people who have joined in and those that are still joining in. Yeah, so maybe John, you can just lead me and direct me and we can start. I'm busy recovering from a throat infection. So if I'm not audible, please just say, can you maybe just repeat your point again? But I'll try my best. Thanks. All right, John, over to you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Mona. I want to welcome everybody. Welcome to Diamond Training. Welcome to this exciting webinars. As you know, we have webinars every Wednesday. And thanks for those that have joined in through Zoom and those that have joined in through social media. Today we have a very exciting presentation. I think if you are in the world of public relations in Namibia, you know that Ms. Mona is truly one of the best in this country. And personally, she's a personal friend of mine, and she's a winner. I would describe her as a winner, somebody who really wins. So, Ms. Mona, without any delay, it's over to you.
All right, thanks. I will do so. Let me just quickly share my screen. All right. Please let me know if you can see my screen. Just need to put it in slideshow. Can you all see my screen?
Yeah, we can see it, ma'am.
All right, great. Awesome. So I'm really excited about the topic because I truly believe in what we call being proactive in our strategic communication, be it just PR, issues management, reputation management. So when I got the opportunity to present this topic, I was really excited. So just a little bit about myself. I call myself a fixer. I think you guys remember Olivia Pope back then with the series Scandal, I think. And so I regard myself as a fixer. I like to solve complex strategic communication problems. I get a kick out of it. And so I've been doing that for over 13 years with strategic communication, brand management, reputation management, experience, and much more. All right, so I have tried to sort of see my talk as building a house. So we're going to start with introduction, laying the foundation, actually building the house, the roof, and then reaching conclusion. Right, so since the introduction of social media, stakeholders are more connected to the organization and their brands than ever before. I think people feel that they have ownership over certain brands and organizations. And so social media has really become a very powerful communication tool because then it allows the two-way communication to happen. And it also requires companies to be more transparent and immediate with their communication. Organizations that communicate quickly and effectively are more successful in managing crises, right? And successful crisis communication occurs in organizations where professionals have the power to provide information as soon as possible without delays. Now, in our context, especially in Namibia, there's a lot of bureaucracies, there's a lot of layers, and by the time you get the final approval, the crisis is already broken on social media and the narrative has already been created. So by the time you respond, it's reactive and people have already formed their own opinions and perceptions about the crisis, whether it be true or be false. So although we usually have, well-crafted communication plans, they really are not effective if the organization does not value the input or the skills that us communication professionals bring during a crisis communication issue when it arises. As you can see there from Marius, is if an organization does not value communication that supports the elements needed for excellent crisis communication, a crisis plan is not likely to work. And I think we have lived it, we have seen it when we have been excluded from the boardrooms, when people are, discussing their crises and then they realize they're stuck and then they're like, oh yeah, just go call Morna or, go call Jeanette, I see she's online, or Nelson, so that, they can help us fix this. But by that time, it's too late. We should be there from the onset. And they usually just call the legal professionals, right, to give them the legal opinion. But I'll probably delve into that, the reason why during the training. I think John spoke about the training earlier. I really would like to encourage you to do that training because it's going to be more in depth to what I'm sharing today. And also we'll be doing a lot of exercises where you actually go away with having done a mini crisis communication plan or strategy and an issues management plan for your organization. So if you haven't signed up yet, I really encourage you to do that. So in times of crisis, it doesn't matter if the organization is responsible for the offensive effect or not. People, like I said, have already formed their perception. So if the audience believe that the organization is at fault, then no matter whether it is or it's not, it's still a reputational risk. And the organization needs to take ownership of it. So I see some of my students online as well. And we had a very interesting discussion on Monday in my PR class where we spoke about the Finland Prime Minister with a video that went viral. And we were like, so whether she felt that it was within her private time, within her right, she felt that her privacy was obviously violated by having that video being exposed like that. But whether she felt that it was in her right and it was in her private space, the fact that she holds a certain position in power, people expect certain things from her, right? And given the people she hangs around with, how she interacts with people, it is a reputational risk. So we just need to be aware of those things. So organizations with more favorable reputations prior to a crisis will suffer less damage to their reputation and will recover more quickly than an organization that has not built a strong foundation or reputation. And that is so true. For example, if I'm trying to think of an organization that has a favorable reputation in Namibia. If, for example, I'm trying to think, I haven't really seen a lot of scandal with, let's say, Old Harvest, right? So if anything had to happen with them or their group of companies, their reputation will suffer less damage compared to a company which, I won't mention names, but maybe mention those that are already in the media space, like TransNamib, right? They're really, their reputation currently with the strikes and stuff is really at stake. And I really wish Abigail, I hope she's online. If she's not, hopefully she'll watch, just to see how this session and the training can help her to navigate through the storms that she's currently facing. So social media is believed to be more interactive, authentic, and a credible platform to foster dialogue. And that's probably why it's also very effective in managing crisis. Stakeholders feel that the organization is communicating directly to them via social media, and that helps to build and rebuild trust. So at least they know. With mass media or traditional media, it was one way, right? You send out your message and you're hoping that people get it and understand. But at least with social media, you're able to explain yourself. You're able to delve deeper into issues. You're able to help ease the concerns that the people have by having the dialogue, the two-way dialogue with the concerned stakeholders. So since social media can be shared more easily, that makes it using crisis communication ideal, because more people will get the necessary information faster, and the message is also likely to reach stakeholders in the way they are already receptive to. So I was listening to an interview or a podcast by one of Manchester United, long-time players. I forgot his name. Sorry, I'm not a big soccer fan. But what I found interesting is that he says he uses Twitter for his news, right? And that's how he wants to receive news. So if any crisis had to happen, whether it's in soccer or whatever it is, he would want to hear it and see it from Twitter. So it's very important as communication professionals to really understand the different platforms where our stakeholders are. Which channels do they prefer to receive information? Now in Namibia, we still rely heavily still on traditional media. So we are not negating, or we are not saying that we should completely avoid traditional media. But it is important that, especially you will see, I drew some references from a study that was made that really substantiates and clarifies the different age groups where they would like to receive information. And perhaps that would also help you. I felt that case study particularly appealed more to the African context, and especially the Namibian context, and that's why I chose to use that example. Now, in response to a crisis, stakeholders prefer confessions on the part of the organization, no matter what has caused the crisis, right? And the confession would hopefully mitigate the anger and increase sympathy and loyalty. Now, what I've seen a lot in the Namibian context is first we do defense, then sometimes we do denial, then we underplay or underestimate the crisis. And then when we see that the crisis has really escalated, then we want to take ownership and responsibility. And by that time, people are like done. So when organizations try to reduce the responsibility in a crisis situation, such as through denial, excuse, or justification, it leads to stronger negative reactions from stakeholders. And that has been proven as well through various researches. So the moral of the story is, let us not try to deny. Let us not try to get into the defense. And unfortunately, because a lot of the organizations trust the legal counsel more than the PR counsel, they usually would go the defense and denial route, which is not always beneficial. And that's why it's important that we need to educate our EXCO members, if you are not sitting on EXCO, and those who are sitting on EXCO, to really educate your fellow EXCO members why denying and defense and justification is the wrong route to use at the onset of a crisis. Organizations have various audiences, each with various diverse interests and goals. An organization must identify the most important audiences and prioritize those audiences. So depending on what the crisis is, right, it's important that, for example, communicate to your staff. Like, I always feel it's always interesting that a crisis would break out and then the staff will also get to see it in the paper the same time as the rest of the world. And that's just wrong, because obviously your staff are your biggest brand ambassadors and they need to also understand the issue first. for them to advocate for you, because during a crisis, you really need everyone on your, as many people on your side to advocate and stand with you. Communication professionals today must have an understanding of social media so that when a crisis situation hits, they can effectively use social media to their advantage and incorporate its use into their organization crisis response. That's very important. So you need to know how each channel works, basically, how YouTube, how Instagram, how Twitter, how best can you use the analytical tools to monitor what's happening. If you need to block trolls, how do you do that? If you need to send out messaging at the same time or schedule messaging, how do you do that? So you really need to effectively know how each of these channels, especially the channels that your organization has chosen to use, work. Okay. If you have questions, you're welcome to just maybe raise your hand, and then John can just help me. I don't mind the dialogue, because then it means I'm not so alone. But yeah, so if you have questions, do let me know. John?
Yes, ma'am. I'll jot them down.
Okay. So everybody's good so far, right? All right. So organizations should embrace social media as a crisis communication strategy, as many people use social media as a tool, right? During crises, people actually spend more time online. A lot of the crises, even in Namibia, are always broken first online. And because a lot of the newspapers also have online platforms, you would already see the breaking news the night before it breaks. And so it already creates anticipation of what is to come in the next day. So it's really, really important that we start understanding the power that social media has in providing that two-way response and monitoring tool that it can offer through a crisis. Okay, so we're now moving into the foundation and what I think you need to have. You see, what I always say, and it's something I've always advocated, is that it's really important to be prepared, right? Number one. Number two, it's important to have a very strong foundation in your strategic communication framework or paradigm, because if you don't, and the crisis happen, and these crises can happen at any time, if you're not prepared, you will definitely fail. And so the things that I want to share is things that I've done practically, that I know have worked and will work for you if you have them in place. And that's the proactive side of crisis communication. The first one is, you honestly, in this day and age, you need to have a social media, whether it's a practitioner, officer, you need to have someone who is really specialized in digital marketing and knows how to navigate themselves through the different platforms. Because gone are the days where you sort of see it as a side thing. Social media, in fact, even a social media manager, to that extent, someone who can really manage digital platforms, because this thing where we just sporadically post, or there's no real intent or strategy around our digital platforms, things are moving digitally. COVID has shown us that digital communication is one of the effective ways to reach many people. And also because of globalization and the fact that we can now communicate and interact with people all over the world, I think social media departments, managers, offices are becoming even more critical. And that's why it's important that you already are, before even a crisis happens, you already have channels and you've already built a community on those channels, that when a crisis happens, you are able to, number one, communicate to the community that you have built online, and two, that you can have some form of rapport. Number two, you need to have a crisis committee in place and set. In the training, I will touch on, what are the people you need to have in a committee, what are the characteristics, and so on. But one of the things that I've seen lately is that you need to have a social media person, not just a communication person. You can have the communication, like strategic communication person, but you also need to have the digital marketing strategist, whatever title you give them on this committee, because like we said, a lot of the crisis is first hit online. So they also need to be part of the committee, which is not traditional, because if you look at traditionally, you usually would say the HR, the legal, the PR person, the CEO, the operations, and then obviously it depends on which department the crisis hits, and then that person is in it. But now, as a standard, someone who does social media has to be part of this committee. Thirdly, you need to have a crisis plan. It's inevitable, and this plan needs to be updated annually. In that plan, you obviously would have your positioning statements, and like I discussed on Monday with my students, if, for example, I was the PR person or spokesperson for the Finland Prime Minister, right? I would have already crafted. So, for example, I would know that number one, there are gender stereotypes already for women that are in power, right? There's always a higher moral expectation from women in leadership versus men, which is something I guess we'll be fighting for 100 years. But as a strategic PR proactive person, I would then have looked at what are the various scandals or issues that would hit someone of her age, of her gender, in her position. And then I would have created positioning statements to address those kind of issues. So when they come, like for example, when this video hit, while you're still collecting information, you would have then sent out your positioning statement out in the media space while you're now trying to figure out what has happened. So that's really the importance of having your plan in place. Secondly, you need to have a social media strategy. Very important. Be building your community. I spoke about it, knowing which platforms your stakeholders mostly use, and knowing and already crafting your messaging around that. So that's also, I spoke about that at length already. The other thing that a lot of organizations don't do, I just need to quickly blow my nose. Forgive me, sorry. Okay. The other thing that a lot of organizations don't do is what we call cyber security and communication awareness internally. We need to proactively educate staff on cyber crises that take place in the workplace. Ensure that we have placed the required security measures on the required devices, and conduct refresher awareness internally on the communication and social media policies. So if you don't have a communication and social media policy, again, the training, we can share about it. But the cybersecurity awareness, guys, is really important. If you don't have the luxury, okay, so like GIPF, we have a cybersecurity officer who helps and conducts these sort of awareness. But if you don't have one, it doesn't stop you as a communication person to proactively go. I mean, Google is one of our best teachers to go on and look at possible cyber crimes or cybersecurity issues that can impact the workplace. And then you conduct those awareness issues. Or you can then call cybersecurity experts, maybe from the ministry or MICT, to come and conduct with your team, so that, because a lot of the crises also happen due to cybersecurity issues. So for example, you might get a link, click on a link, and then this link, I think it's called malware. It just creates viruses on your computer. It affects the network. Important information is deleted from the organization. That's a huge crisis, right? Or where you would use your memory stick and then this memory stick has viruses. So there's all kinds of really different different cyber issues that can happen within an organization that can literally shut down your organization, because you then give access to hackers into your system. And that's why you've got to have different authentications and so on your
Ms. Mona? I think we just lost her there for a minute. Let me just try call and see what the problem is. Ms. Mona? Unfortunately, we cannot hear you. No, unfortunately, we cannot hear you. Maybe try to reconnect your sound. Okay, let's give her a second while she really just tries to reconnect the sound, and then we can get back to the presentation. Ms. Mona? Wonder what happened to her. Ms. Mona. Unfortunately, we still cannot hear you. Thank you, Mr. Dante Rioma, for your comment. Ms. Mona, once she's back, she'll address the comment. I think she's back, Ms. Mona.
Hi, can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, can you see me?
Unfortunately, no. There's something wrong with your screen.
Okay.
We can hear you.
I really don't know why technology is trying to. Okay, can you see my presentation?
Yeah, we can. Now we can.
Okay. All right, great. Okay, great. So, I think I was at crisis communication drills. This is so important, guys. Like, I can't stress how important it is, because a lot of the times we literally just have this communication plan, we tick the box and we leave it there. And then I don't even know whether we actually even go to that plan when we are hit with a crisis, or it's just a tick box exercise. But communication drills are really important. Number one, there's simulations. It's important to do simulations once a year at least, where you actually create a crisis, sort of like obviously a fake one, where it can be a media drill, where it's a media crisis, where maybe, a fraud or a scandal happened within the organization, and now the CEO has to answer whatever it is. And then now you actually bring in even journalists, and then they ask questions, you prepare questions, and then you drill them. You have a camera, and then you actually see how the CEO or the spokesperson reacts. And then after that, you give them notes to see how they can prepare. You can also have incident drills where maybe, something happens within a building, or, and then how would the people react? So the same way we have these emergency drills, the same way. I just wanted to just hold on for me. Just hold on. All right. So it's really important that the same way we do these emergency drills that is required by a municipality is the same thing that we need to do with our communication drills and crisis communication drills. Okay. Monitoring and evaluation. Really, really important. Organization can use, for example, Google Alerts. So you can already actually set it up now where you can, everything that is mentioned about your organization, then you have it checked through Google Alerts so that you can be aware of what is being spoken about your organization when you aren't even aware of it. Media monitoring of local companies like TrendQuest and NAMedia, they can also be useful if you have the budget for it. And then you can also use inbuilt analytics that come with various social media platforms like the ones I have shown on the screen. Media relations is also really, really important. You really need to constantly build healthy relationships with the media. Now, I want to stress on something that is really, really important with regards to media relations, and especially pertaining to a crisis. Okay. I just have my technical person quickly here, just so that we can sort out something. Just hold on for me.
One is sorting it out. I think there was a question from the.
Okay, there was a question. Okay, great. All right. Yes, please.
From Mr. Dante. He just put it in the chat, and he says, "I am a PR officer for my company, and they do not prioritize PR and communication. How do I get them to take our office serious?"
Okay, wow, that's a very good question. So Dante, I think it starts with you. It starts with how do you take how are you presenting PR in your organization? Like I've said before, if you're not proactive, you see, I think a lot of the times we wait for us to be given a seat at the table. But in this case, we have to create the seat ourselves. We need to prove our worth. We need to prove. So just to go in a little bit in terms of the functions of PR. Number one, we are seen as the watchmen of the organization. We are seen as the ethics officers of our organizations. We are seen to be at the forefront of trends, analyzing trends and being aware by doing environmental scans of what's happening. And then we advise, we are counselors to EXCO. So now if you don't play those roles, your executive members or your managers will not see your relevance in that organization. So if you are merely playing a technical role, and by technical, I mean, you are literally just doing what you're told to do, like as in implementing plans and executing them, then you will always be seen in that light. I hope that gives just a short snippet, but you are welcome to contact me. My contacts are on this presentation at the end, and then we can have a coffee about it, because that's something that I'm really passionate about in making and helping public relation practitioners being seen as strategic partners within organizations. That's something I thrive at, and that's something I'm good at. So we'll have a chat with that Dente over coffee, so you can take me over coffee. So what I just wanna really stress with regards to media relations is building, and it's something that we hardly really talk about, media buying and media planners. Those guys are very, very important in crisis management strategy, but overall our communication strategy. What do I mean by that? You see, as PR people, right, we have certain, depending also on your organization, we need to obviously measure out how effective our communication is, especially in the media space, but we need to work as partners. Now, one of the biggest things with that a lot of the journalists or newspapers share is that we like to send our press releases, but we don't advertise with, so especially the smaller newspapers, the upcoming newspapers, not the mainstream media, because a lot of the time the mainstream media sometimes will not place your media release, but then these smaller ones would support you, but you wouldn't support them in your advertising spend. So when a crisis hits and you want, especially these online newspapers that at least you can get your information when it breaks on that same day, you really need to prioritize those relationships, guys. And don't promise an exclusivity to one media only. If you're seen as a practitioner to only favor certain media houses, especially with your advertising spend, when a crisis comes, the other newspapers will not carry your message. So it's a very fragile relationship, and it needs to be managed well. Okay. Sorry, shouldn't be saying I'm trying to get to the next. Okay. The other thing you need to do in terms of proactive crisis management is you need to have an issues management plan in place. The issues management plan, a lot of organizations also don't have this. And it's something that I was able to implement in my organization, is that before things become a crisis, there are first issues. There are issues within your organization. A lot of the times we run surveys, employee satisfaction surveys, communication audit. What do you do with those results? What do you do with them? Okay, fine, you present them, EXCO says, okay, great, we know what the issue is, you tick a box, and then what happens? Because surveys, the reason why we run surveys is because it checks the climate within the organization. And so what I have done is that I've looked and collected all the surveys that we have done in GIP, for example. And then I had looked at common issues that have come across different surveys. Now, we had ethics surveys, we had culture surveys, we had communication surveys, we had HR surveys, and I realized that there was a common thread of issues that happened that keep coming out in the survey. So then I created, so that was the scanning, identified them, I collected them, and I analyzed the issues using this process: issues identification, analysis, evaluation, action plan, and monitoring. Now the action plan is, I created then a plan where I assigned an issue to the relevant department head or manager. And then I also gave the same list to our risk department so that they can ensure that they flag these issues onto the risk registers of the respective department. I also used the same issues management, and I went to internal audit and ensured that it's also on the audit register of the respective department, so that there's constant monitoring and reviewing of those issues. Because once those issues are dealt with, they don't become crises. So a lot of the crises can actually be prevented if we have an effective issues management plan in place. And like I said, during the training that I'll be conducting on the 14th of September, we'll also be looking into that, and I can also help you in how you can create your own issues management plan for your organization. Right, now we're building a house, okay? The development of the message. So it's really important that when you're developing your messaging, whether it's the positioning statements, you need to really identify who are your key audiences. You need to anticipate what are their needs and expectations. And most of the time, you would also be able to pick that up through the comments that are currently happening within on social media, especially when a crisis breaks, and be accurate and avoid jargon within your communication. A key message, especially during a crisis, is not a fact or a statistic, but rather a statement that succinctly communicates what the public needs to know about the company's role or responsibility for the issue. People aren't interested in, yeah, this is how great we are, and this is how we know. They want to know what happened, what are you going to do about it, and how you're going to fix and make sure it doesn't happen in the future again. Okay. Organizations where communication professionals have independence to provide information as quickly as possible without needing to seek approval of messaging will have more success in crisis communication. So again, organizations, especially EXCO, need to trust us as specialists, as communication specialists, to be able to develop messaging that is that really fits the needs and expectations of our stakeholders, without a lot of the legal jargon that that companies sort of run to protect themselves. Now, there's what we call a social media crisis model plan, and it has 5 components. It has crisis origin, type, infrastructure, content, and message form. And this model is really used a lot when we also need to develop messaging. So the model suggests that people use social media during crises for 3 motivations. The first one is issue relevance. The second one is information seeking, sharing. And the third one, which I found very interesting and very true, especially in the Namibian context, is emotional venting or support, okay? People are increasingly considering the internet to be the most reliable source of news because the information is quick and it encourages conversation. And so this model helps communicators to understand how their audience create, consume, and share information online. Again, we will look at this model in the training, and we can do a practical scenario of a crisis and how you use this model to filter it. Now, why an organization should first release information on a crisis? You see, if the crisis information is disseminated by a third party through social media, right? Publics attribute dependent emotions such as anger, contempt, and disgust are likely to happen, because now you allowed someone else to create a narrative about something that might not even be true or be exaggerated. And my gosh, we've seen this in many organizations, many times, where if we allow communication, if we allow third parties to distribute that message on our behalf, you will definitely see emotions of anger, contempt, and disgust by the stakeholders. A research that was done by these 3 guys determined that the medium that people receive the message from in a crisis situation matters more than the message itself in terms of implication for the organization, reputation, and the reaction. So the medium is important, right? How was it shared? Was it shared on a email? Was it shared on your social media platforms? Because also staff tend to take ownership of a message or a crisis or help when they feel involved and they were, sort of informed, especially if it's a small group, when they inform face to face to bring in understanding and allow them to ask questions, right? But when you just decide to send the thing on a notice board, one-way communication, it just shows that you don't really want involvement or participation from the team. And yeah, you will then see that there's sometimes lack of accountability of ownership. People are more likely to pass along or react to messages when they are angry about the incident, right? And people will also be sharing information on social media during a crisis situation, regardless of if the organization affected is sharing information itself, making it challenging for an organization to shape how the situation unfolds if it does not engage in social media. So we also need to realize that I know some organizations are very tight-lipped about, what's happening with the crisis. They don't want to inform staff of, the progress of the crisis. What you create is a grapevine, and people will share, and people will still talk about the crisis, even if the organization is quiet about it. And then it creates a whole new narrative that completely is way out. And by the time you want to respond, and by the time you want to create shape and bring your rightful and correct position, it's too late, right? So the challenges with communicating on social media, I mean, with every platform, there are challenges, right? So why PR organizations avoid using social media? The first one, they feel they cannot control the message in social media settings. The commenting could get out of hand and not relate to the information that the organization is able to share at the time. And social media doesn't really allow them to tell the story, the way that they want to tell it. So these have been, and I'm also sure, our excuses and many practitioners' excuses of why they avoid using social media. And they might be granted, yes, but we need to work around these challenges and find a way, because whether we like it or not, social media and how news breaks on social media will not stop. Professionals really need to be more cautious with their word choice, because they have limited space to post information, and that information is easily shareable. So that means if information is incorrect, it could cause greater damage on social media. So the one thing is, you can't avoid being on the platform. However, you just need to ensure that your choice of words, your tone of words, your resonance on social media is really important during social media. That's why you can't just have anyone posting. And that's why I'm saying that you need to have someone who's trained in social media, someone who's trained to write content for social media, because there is a difference between writing online and writing from print media. And there are specialized courses that deal with that aspect. And I'm able to refer you to some. If you're interested, you can contact me, because I've done some of them myself. It's really important that you educate yourself in how to write for online platforms and how to optimize your content and ensure that it really answers the what if questions that many of the stakeholders have. More reasons why practitioners avoid social media. They're saying they do not use social media because they felt that the situation changed too quickly to get responses in place, and they feared putting out misinformation could further damage the organization. And some negative consequences of social media include unparalleled rate that information can now be shared online. So that, I think, is the fear with many, many people. The fact that many issues are being exposed online does that could have gone unnoticed is also a scary fact for many people. So again, in as much as these reasons are valid, and were valid before, the fear of what could be shouldn't prevent us from still not really communicating and using social media to our best ability. So organizations where, oh, this one is, so I wanted to share some results that emanated from like the research that I spoke about from Ruth, who did a research on the impact that social media has on crisis communication. So if you look at this graph, it says age and how people seek information regarding crises. Now, if you look at the age gap, a lot of the 18 to 25 use online news media to look for news. The 26 to 35 also, in fact, most of them use online media, right? But then you can see that the older folks also now use a bit of television as well. But it's important to highlight that a lot of the people are now using online media, and predominantly, if you want to reach the younger sort of generation and even a bit older, they're all now online. So this is proven that online is becoming more and more prevalent and important. The next one says age and how often people use social media when seeking information. Again, if you look at that, frequently more people are accessing social media for news, right? Compared to any other source. Again, if you look at this graph, you would see that majority seek information from Facebook and Twitter. It's again the case here in Namibia. I truly believe that. I think with the other platforms, it's still growing, but a lot of the people get their news from Facebook and Twitter. I actually know of friends who have disabled some of their accounts like Instagram and so on, just to be on Facebook and Twitter for news. So how social media is used as crisis situations are unfolding. So many of them use, especially on Facebook and Twitter, as you can see, they use to get information from news sources, right? 83% of them on Facebook and 54% on Twitter. So again, and then what was so interesting is that they also try to access firsthand citizenship journalist accounts. So citizen journalist is like, for example, Joe Mampanda. So most people would probably go and also believe and go to his site for news because he's seen as a credible citizen journalist, right? And if you can see here, the percentages of those that also go to the organization is Facebook and Twitter pages is also fairly high. So that's why it's important that you ensure that your Facebook, your social media platforms are also updated with the current information. Okay. So in this research, when asked about crisis situations that could be characterized as an emergency, 83% responded used social media to get information from media sources, and 56 get the information directly from the organization. So again, can you see that the disparity in terms of those that go to social media and those that actually go to the information with the organization website for information? So people trust other people and not organizations anymore, which is actually becoming a concern. And that's why it's important that we have what we call influence. I think I just missed a slide there. I had also included under social media strategy. Influencer marketing, it's becoming more and more important. But it's also important that you have the right influencers. And when I talk about influencers, I know the first thing that rings to mind is our celebrities and stuff, but influencers can also be like what you call these activists. It can be people within the industries that are seen to be credible. So they don't always have to be sort of celebrities. Your influencers need to align with your brand. They need to align with your brand ethos, and they need to align with your brand promise. It's also very important that you don't only look at influencers based on their followership or based, because you also need to see what is the quality of their followers. Is it really people that you would deem as critical stakeholders that would be valuable within, to help understand your crisis, or is it just really random people? So it's also important that you really look at the quality of the fellowship, of the followership of your influencers. Very, very important. When asked about crisis situations that could be characterized as public relations nightmare, 66 again would rather go to news media sources, and only 59 would rather go to the organization. Can you see the problem there, right? So the rise of citizen journalism and how people are turning to social media to get more in-depth look at a crisis situation as it unfolds, rather than only what the traditional media forms are reporting. So there is a rise in citizen journalism, and it's very clear in Namibia that people believe, for example, if Joe Bampanda sings something right now, it will go viral because he's now seen as a credible source of information, because he wouldn't just put something on there that he knows is not backed up by some form of facts or documents or so on. I see chats have about 8 chats. I don't know, is it questions, John, maybe before I continue? Is there anyone with questions?
Some of them are questions, but I think you can address them once you're done.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah,
all right.
Some of them are comments, some of them are questions.
Okay, great. Okay, great. So Rick Kaufman, he's a APR. APR is accredited public relation practitioner. It's the highest accreditation level within public relations. So that's why I put his views up, so that we can really digest them, we can look at them, we can debate them. So Kaufman discussed how he believes one of the first steps in successful crisis communication is reducing uncertainty that arises. You see, within a crisis, the more space and the more time we allow for no communication, the grapevine grows, and then lies and wrong perceptions are created. So that's why it's really important that you really try to lessen that gap as quickly as possible. He noted how in the past, when faced with crisis situation, organizations would take time gathering information to make statements for the various questions that would be asked in response to the situation. But now that is outdated. You see, and that's what we do. We would go, then we gather information, we go from legal operations, wherever, then we create the statement, and then only we release it. And that's already end of the day. Already throughout the day, online, the conversation has started. It's too late. He further said, I think when we are communicating in a crisis, you have to be first. If you're not first as an organization, you spend a whole lot of time playing catch up, sometimes for hours, certainly days, even weeks or longer, depending on the magnitude of the crisis. You have to be right. If you're not right, your mistakes are often repeated, or worse, cited as the truth, and you have to be credible. So you need to stop playing catch up. A lot of the organizations, PR, crisis issues, they are playing catch up. It's reactive, and that's not good at all. If you're not right or first, then you will not be credible. So when we talk about crisis communication and the use of social media, it's really using that tool to its advantage, which is to get information out in a very rapid, quick manner, and then it begins to allow you to take hold of the messages. Our stakeholders no longer want to be communicated to, but want to be part of the information, or want to be part of the crisis, if you will, or tragedy. So an important note to take. Stakeholders no longer want to be communicated to, right? They want to be part of the conversation. They want to be part of the solution. That's the shift in the paradigms of the stakeholders that we're dealing with now. And it's important to note that when you craft your crisis comms. He further said that organizations should already be established on the respective social media channels, like I noted earlier. If you're not already there, you don't even have a chance to get to them when the crisis starts. They've now gone to other sources, other trusted sources to get the information. Do you see why it's important that you have a social media person that is constantly, every day, managing your social sites and ensuring that they build a good community online? Because when the crisis hits, if you are only then going to go on social media because you know it's one of the platforms and you haven't created any community, you haven't had any engagement, then there's no use really communicating on that platform because there's no one to communicate to. People have the propensity to forgive and forget as long as the organization is willing to apologize and really talk more about not letting it happen again and what we will do to fix it. Listen to concerns that others put out there and be accountable to the public, because that's what they're demanding by not holding up and not sharing information. I shared with my class on Monday that if you tell, there's two things that you don't do to the media. One, don't say no comment. I mean, that's number one rule that we've learned in PR. But the other thing is also that if you promise to get back to them. Don't lie to journalists. They're not dumb. Because when you create that vacuum, they can never trust you as a reliable source again. Stephen says, don't be afraid of social media. It is here to stay. And I think organizations that are not using it are putting themselves at a disadvantage. The opportunity is there to be able to tell people what you're doing. Tell people what they can do. Tell people what you know. And tell people what you don't know. If you don't know, then you don't know, Moss. Like if there's a crisis happening, don't lie to the people and say no. If you just say, unfortunately, we don't have all the information at the moment. However, when we get light or when we are more, if we're aware of the information, we will share it. So there's three things that you need to be, four things. Tell people what you're doing about this crisis. Tell them what they can do during this crisis. Tell them what you know. And if you don't know, tell them also. Henny Berry also said, people are going to be reading your tweets in a crisis situation. Their ability to kind of take in and process this information is going to be limited because they're going to be in a state of panic. The simpler that you can make the message, it becomes more action-orientated. You can make it easier to follow and you can get people to respond better, meaning that they'll do whatever you tell them to. So it's really important that you need to make your message simple, action-orientated, to make it easier for people to respond and follow, especially if you're sending out tweets. Then you said that you must also monitor how people are reacting. He described how to use social media in this regard by saying you want to make sure you're listening to what people's reactions are. And that's why I love social media during a crisis, because you get to measure the temperature of people's based on their comments. An organization can determine whether or not it makes sense to participate in the conversation to clarify. Sometimes it's not important to participate. Sometimes it's just good to monitor the conversation and see where it goes. Okay. Sometimes the communities are self-regulating and they're kind of figuring it out themselves and dealing with it. You can kind of sit back and let the conversation flow because it's all going fine. People are correcting each other and it's okay. So it's not always necessary to comment. He also argued that Twitter is typically redirecting people to content elsewhere, so it doesn't always solve the communication problem. Instead, many social media channels really need to consider where their audiences go and find information. You need to look up the social media channels that are used by the group of audiences and design your crisis communication around it. So this guy's views, Kuchersky, believes that Twitter, although many people go to Twitter for news, it's not always the best platform to solve communication problems, right? So again, it's important to know, where do your stakeholders go for information? If your stakeholders are NBC people, then go on NBC. If they're the Namibian kind of people, then go onto the Namibian platform as well. Try to really understand the channels that they like. What happens in the first wave of information out there is a lot of notification and speculation, right? Then the 24-hour news stations come in and give us more of an interpretation. This is now when the crisis breaks. Then the analysis stage continues in and after that, and then there's a retrospective phase of what's going to happen going forward. So what social media has created, it has created a new phase of evolution of the crisis at the forefront. So if you have to manage, information coming out, you really have to try to come up with that information as quickly as possible and not wait for, like what used to happen, for 24 hours before you can communicate the issue. Okay. So I think, yeah, that was my last slide. To conclude, really, I just want us to remember one thing. You need to own your narrative. We need to stop catching up as practitioners. We need to stop being reactive to crisis communication. Number two, we need to be prepared. We need to have the relevant foundation based on the things that I discussed earlier. You need to train yourself. You need to keep yourself updated with what is currently happening. If you don't know, then go out and find out. And I'm really happy that the Diamond Institute of Training is offering this online crisis communication, reputation management, course, so that it can really help practitioners. And what I love, teaching is one of my vocation. I love it. I love to empower. I love to teach. I love to learn. So I'm going to use the training opportunity that the Diamond Institute Training has offered to really help practitioners on this platform and those listening to, with what I've learned over the years and what I've seen has helped. And it's going to be a very practical session because I'm a practical person. I don't believe, and that's why I'm not an academic, although I love teaching. I really like to see things practical so they can work for you. And then lastly, invest in good monitoring tools. It's really important that you're constantly watching and constantly seeing what is being spoken about your brand out there to be able to be proactive. So that's the course, learn how to engage with audience with compelling messages that can boast and defend your organization's presence and reputation. Yeah, so catch us in Albertina on 12 to 14. I'll be on the 14th. Albertina will be with you throughout the week. So thank you. Those are my contact details and my telephone if you'd like to reach me. And I look forward to the questions and the discussions that we'll be having. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Mona. That is a very insightful presentation. I think there are some comments from the social media, but I think we can address those from inside the comments first. Maybe if you just, there was a comment.
Are you able to see me? I don't know what's going on in my camera. Yeah.
Unfortunately, we cannot see you, but we can hear you.
Okay, that's good enough. Okay, I'm ready.
I think there was, if you just read in the comment section, there was some comments from Ms. Jeanette, and then
Okay.
Mr. Botha.
But anyone can shout now while you are reading. If there's any comments, anything that you would like more clarity on.
Okay, there's a comment from the social media. It says communication drill will never work at the public institution. Top management is too busy. Ms. Mona? Ms. Mona? Hello? Hello? Ms. Mona? Looks like we've lost Ms. Mona again. But again, I want to thank everybody for joining. It was a very insightful presentation. I think Ms. Mona really did it justice. But if you have any other questions, I think we'll post the questions to Ms. Mona, and then she will reply. But we really encourage everybody to really sign up for the course the Digital Public Relations and Organizational Crisis Management course that is upcoming from the 12th to the 14th. I think we have really a good lineup of presenters, Ms. Mona and Ms. Albertina. And as Ms. Mona had mentioned, she's a very practical person. So it's going to be a very, very practical course. But with that said, yeah, I want to thank everybody. I think Ms. Mona is really having trouble. So I think I'll end the call. I'll end the session now. And then thank you for Ms. Botha, Elias. I don't know if it's it's Mr. or Mrs. Maybe you can just come in there, just unmute yourself. Botha, thank you for the comment. Oh, all right, my mistake. But thank you for the comment, and thanks everybody for tuning in. Ms. Mona, can you hear us again? Yeah, it looks like she's having a trouble again. But nevertheless, thanks everybody for joining. I'll end the session now. There were a few questions from social media. One of them said owning the narrative with comrades is impossible. They just say anything, which I I believe is very true. Okay, everybody. Ms. Mona doesn't want me to end the session. She's just trying again. She just wants to address some of the comments, especially this one on owning the narrative with comrades is impossible. They just say anything. Maybe she can really comment on that one. Then another one came in. What is the main difference on writing for online versus print? Oh,
Can you
here
hear
she
me
is.
now?
Yeah, now we can hear you now.
Okay, great. Awesome. So can we fire away with the comments and questions?
Okay, so I think we can look at this one. Owning the narrative with comrades is impossible. They just say anything.
Okay. Well, that's true. When it comes to government PR, it's a little bit tricky, especially if you're working for ministers or so, that they really just don't respect what PR brings to the table. But that's why it's our job to constantly educate them. It's our job to constantly really help them understand that certain messaging, certain words, certain tonalities can really badly impact them. You see, with any stakeholder, whether it's your comrades, whether it's the stakeholders outside, you always need to show them what is it in for them. Always show them what is it in for them. So even with a comrade, especially now with Congress coming, everybody wants to shine. I'm sure everybody, except for people, all want to be president. I'm sure. I'm assuming for those who are politicians. So you need to help them understand that by you helping to shape their narrative, you are actually helping them in their career or their political aspirations. So you always need to really position and say, what is it in for the person that I want to help? Yeah. Is John next?
All right. Thank you, ma'am. I think that's an excellent answer. And then we have one thing. What is the main difference on writing for online versus print?
Oh my gosh, that's like a very packed question. So just to maybe just to answer that, number one, the way you write your headlines, again, the biggest thing about online versus print is, number one, less words. It mustn't be bulky. That's why copywriting becomes, you need to really hone copywriting, the skills of copywriting, because you have to say as much with less words, because online you don't have a lot of time to be reading. So on print media, you've got space and time to express yourself. Online, you need to use your words cleverly, and you need to use them smartly, and you need to, like, your headline should also be catchy, right? So for example, I'm just trying to think of an example. Trying to think of one just to show you the difference between headlines, but it's really a whole art. Maybe Diamond Training can provide a platform for me to do just a session on that, because that's also another passion that I have, is how to write for websites, how to write for social media, because it's really an art, and it's I love it. It's really cool, because you get to bring creative side in writing on those online platforms. But it's a loaded question, so we can also have tea or coffee. You can take me out for tea and coffee. Whoever made that comment. Yeah.
All right,
Yes,
thanks,
John,
Ms. Warner. I'll definitely look at maybe creating a session for writing for the different platforms. And then the next one says, our communication drill will never work at public institutions. Top management is too busy.
Okay. Again, like I said, you need to help your top management understand what is it in for them. Why you need to sell that communication drill to them. You can never be too busy. When a crisis hits, then all of a sudden all that business ceases. It ceases because it's now your career and that institution's career that is at stake. And a lot of public institutions are always in some form of crisis. So you need to create the need.
you need to create the need. It's important that you need to create that need for them to help them understand why it's important. And I don't think you can always be busy, honestly. You can make time. You can do a half-day session. If they can make time for all these other unnecessary meetings, sometimes they can make time for something that can actually have an impact on their careers. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, John.
And then the last one says social media experts. Where do I get one of those?
Where do you get one of those? One, you can start with yourself. You can start by learning. You can start by attending courses. That's the first step. I did a digital marketing course with Stellenbosch. There's one with UCT as well online. You can so it really also starts with you. That's one. Two, I'm sure they're out there. So if you put out an ad, you're able to find them. They are there. There are people who have the skill, who love being there, but they just need the qualifications, or they just need further training. So sometimes you also just need to identify. There's a lot of interns in my class that my class that say they're very passionate about social media and so on, that are interns. So again, do a call out. You never know what you'll find.
I think that's really good advice. I think the person who's asking is, I think she's a deputy minister, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, okay, awesome.
And then the last one is Jeanette asks, the Access to Information Bill or Act, how will that impact our crisis communication strategies?
Okay, so we were supposed to have Shoki and I. We do the Namibian PR House, and we were supposed to have a session on the information bill. I have not read it yet. I am about to. It's that and the ISO 9000 on quality documentation, all of that. So those are some of the things that I'm still to really interrogate. So at the moment, I don't know. I do know that there was a workshop run with the PRs in government. If there are any online, perhaps maybe they can help me answer that question. But it's something that is worth looking into, because it will definitely, especially when it comes to, at what extent can you divulge stakeholders' information and so on. It does definitely have an impact, but at the moment, I'm not sure. I don't know yet.
Right, thank you, ma'am. I think we've exhausted all the questions. I think it was a very interesting session, the most lively that we've had. Again, Ms. Moon, I want to thank you. It was very insightful, and I'll definitely come back to you about the different platforms, writing for different platforms. And thank you for everybody who joined, especially Mr. Botha. Your comments are noted. Thank you, sir. Mona?
Also, are there any other questions? Any comments before we close? Is everybody good? Just call me with sugar jokes with Alice. But yeah, all right. So it was really a pleasure. I see my voice is also sort of come back, which is good, clearly, because I'm really passionate about strategic comms. I'm passionate about reputation management. So yeah, let's have coffee. Let's chat. I think one of the things, maybe in closing, the HR fraternity is really organized. They've got HR groups. They discuss issues and stuff. But us PR communication people, I don't know. I see May Paulino is online, May Ivy, and she's really trying with Prisa, but I don't know why we can't have conversations with one another. We suffer in silence. We stay in our silos. So I'm really hoping that through the opportunities that the Diamond Training Institution is offering, that we were able to really have more engagements and more platforms to talk to one another. And I hope that you all sign up for the course. It's going to be fun. It's going to be very interactive. It's going to be very practical. If your organization doesn't want to pay for it, I'm sure you can make budget adjustments. It's only 4,200, right, John?
Yes, ma'am. It's only 4,000.
Yeah, it's a worth investment that you can take anywhere really. So let's learn from one another. I enjoy learning from everyone. And yeah, let me see you on the 14th, so 12 to 14 September. And that's a wrap for me.
Thank you, Ms. Mona. I think if there's no other comments, maybe somebody wants to unmute themselves and say a comment. Okay. In the absence of any other comments, thank you, Ms. Mona. I think she really said everything that I wanted to say regarding the upcoming course. And yeah, us from Diamond Training Institute want to thank you for really joining this webinar. Now we'll have another webinar next week on a topical issue, just like we had today. And then please like us on our social media pages and visit our website and sign up for our courses. So thank you.
Sorry, John, before you go, how do we get the recording? Because there's a couple of people who could make it this today, including my GM. He really wanted to tune in. So how do we get the recording?
Okay, the recording, we will put it on our Facebook page, but I will also personally send you this recording.
All right, thank you.
All right, thanks everybody for tuning in. And then, as I said, like us on our social medias, and hopefully we see you again next week. So, thank you.
Bye, everyone.